Welcome to Don't You Forget About Me, the New Wave Music Podcast. My name's Steve.
And I'm T-Bone.
We'd like to welcome you guys back for the episode this week. We are going to kick things off with the band Sparks. Sparks, you may have heard some of their hits, such as This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us. Cool Places. When Do I Get to Sing My Way?
So when do I get to do it my way? When do I get to feel like Sid Vicious does? When do I get to sing my way? In heaven or hell?
The name of their new album, their most recent album, I should say, is A Steady Drip, Drip, Drip. And this one came out 2020. It's their 24th album, and they've been around since the early 70s. So that's a pretty good a number of albums over the years.
Yes, it is. A lot of bands we're talking about, they've been around for celebrating their 40th anniversary. Sparks is over their 50th anniversary.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. They actually began as a band called Halverson back in the late 60s, early 70s, and then changed to Sparks in the early 70s. This iteration has, of course, Ron and Russell Mael on vocals and keyboards, Patrick Kelly on bass, Steve Nister on drums, and both Eli Pearl and Evan Weiss on guitars.
So the opening track on this album is the one called All That.
All that we've done, we've lost, we've won. All that and more. All that we've seen, we've heard, we've dreamed.
On this one, T-Bone, I love the intro to this. It just kind of kicks into the guitar, the chorus to open the song. Great way to get reintroduced to Sparks. The song also likes to build upon itself leading up to the chorus. And I love the lyrics in this. All that we've seen, all that we've dreamed, and more. And all the fears that you will soon be gone. Can't help to think from Sparks that this is their way of saying that they've been around for a while, they've seen a lot, and they're here to stay.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's a great introduction to this album. Maybe even for some people, due to the documentary that Edgar Wright recently put out, maybe they're new to Sparks, and maybe they're going to have this be their first album, which would be amazing considering how many albums they have. And it does have a nice little introduction to who they are.
Yes, it does.
We go in next to the second song, which is one of my favorite on the album, I'm Toast.
I'm toast. It's worse than what I thought. I'm toast. I'm not just overall. I'm toast. Alexa, get me out of this place.
I absolutely think this song is hilarious. You know, Sparks music, especially for the past 10 or 20 years, I'd say, they really just celebrate the ordinary in life with an incredible sense of humor. And this song, telling about how somebody is pretty much finished and everything, it really uses a lot of metaphors in it to make it one of the most pleasurable songs on the album.
Oh, no doubt. This is one that's heavy rotation. It'll get stuck in your mind. And I love the lyric, Alexa, get me out of this place.
Yes. I remember that one also. And it's just, it's so pleasurable.
Yes. And speaking of pleasurable, it goes into the next track, Lawnmower.
You're pushing on your lawnmower, your lawn will be a showstopper, your lawn will be a jaw dropper.
I agree. And now this is my second favorite song on the album.
This is just a song of pure joy. If it doesn't bring a smile to your face, you might be dead inside.
I agree. Yeah, especially the la 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 that she's repeating throughout the song really sets the tone for the whole song itself. You know, the way I'm reading it is it's a story about a man who's so devoted to his lawnmower that it threatens all of his relationships. And as I just mentioned, they seem to focus on the ordinary things of life a lot on most of their songs over the years. And can you get more ordinary of life than a lawnmower?
No, I love how catchy and playful this song is. You know, like I said, it'll get stuck in your head.
I agree.
And vocally, this one is just, you just listen to the lyrics and just, again, pure joy.
Well, and along with the lyrics, I thoroughly enjoyed the keyboards from Ron on it. They really come across strongly, especially on this song, in my opinion.
They do. And then T-Bone, the next song on here is Sainthood is Not in Your Future.
seen it all coming. Your left hook I found most stunning.
On this one, they did a great job kind of bringing it back to the youth. The synthesizers, guitars is amazing. Again, the genius of Sparks on how to make a song work is an example of this song.
Yeah, it's a good song also. I'm a fan of it. If I read this song correctly, and see, that's the thing about this band, and maybe also about the next one that we'll talk about, is that they're not little standard love songs. You know, they have stories behind them. It's trying to figure out exactly what they're talking about. Now, for me, I thought this one was a very amusing song about someone who's simply never going to be a saint, to the point that the Pope is laughing at the idea. I just guess it hit a chord or something. I'm no saint, and so maybe I fall into that category.
And that leads us to the next song, Pacific Standard Time.
In Pacific Standard Time, mine is yours and yours is mine. In Pacific Standard Time.
To me, this one was kind of where it didn't really hold my attention as well as the first four songs. This is where I felt the album kind of took a breather. It's not a bad song per se. It just, the first four tracks were very solid.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we get to the point in the middle of this album where, you know, we've used the word before, filler. They're not bad songs, just as you mentioned, Steve, but at the same time, maybe don't keep the interest that the album initially had.
True. And I mean, Sparks, I kind of forgot about them for a couple of years. Went back at this album, definitely got me re-energized, into Sparks. Went back, listened to some of their other albums. This song here, Pacific Standard Time, might have been a bigger hit on a less par album than this one, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. I think you're right.
And then we go into Stravinsky's only hit.
Stravinsky's only hit, he toned it down a bit. He didn't write the words, that was my job. He hated minor thirds, thought them too absurd. I recommended them to make the girls sad.
I mean, the album starts to pick back up. This is the opening. The opening of the song is just classic new wave.
I like it. I still think it's, for me at least, it's still in that vein of songs that are just, you know, kind of in the middle of the album that don't really have the same kind of value maybe that some at the beginning and at the end have. I tried to understand exactly what the song was about. I guess it's about Stravinsky creating a dance hit and becoming big at the clubs. It was his only hit, and then he goes back to classical music. I'm not 100% sure I got that right, but I think that I understood it correctly.
Yeah, like you said, that one kind of just takes a breather. It's kind of getting back from its breather, but that leads us into the next track, Left Out in the Cold.
Left out in the cold, oh, long before they're sold. Oh, long down jackets, overcoats, ski caps, cause I'm making notes. Long down jackets, overcoats, impervious to cold.
T-Bone, this is one of my favorite ones on this album.
Well, and I like it a lot too. You know, I think the last two kind of soured me a little bit, but this one does have a great chorus, especially.
Oh, no kidding.
Russell's vocals on it are spot on. I don't think that anybody could complain about how this song changes the tone overall of this part of the album and starts to build things back up again.
Yeah, I mean, this one really shows you the experience of Sparks, how well they can make a song like this work. And it does suck you back into the album if you're listening to it from start to finish. And then we get into the track, Self-Effacing.
I'm not the guy who says I'm the guy, always been self-effacing. I'm in the mood, you won't see me soon, always been self-effacing.
This one to me is kind of falls in line. It could be it's just a classic Sparks sounding song. Once you hear it, you'll understand it. It wasn't a highlight or a low light for me. It was just
yeah. I think we can agree on this. I think it does have that classic Sparks sound, especially for the past 10 or 15 years. I got to say again, it was okay. I didn't really find it all that excessively interesting to me, but I didn't dislike the song because it does have some really creative lyrics, really bounces around on the use of those lyrics, and so I found it enjoyable.
And then the next track, One for the Ages.
It's one for the ages, as I write my tone.
This is the track, T-Bone, on the album I just did not care for. This would be my skip track on the album. It just didn't work for me. I just didn't find it as enjoyable as I found even the lower tracks on this album.
I may have liked it just a little bit better than you did. I'm trying to search for my words on how I really felt about it. I did like the way that the vocals and the instrumentation worked together. But yeah, I don't really necessarily think it's one of the stronger songs. I didn't really dislike it, but I didn't love it. Up next, we've got the 10th song, Onomatopoeia.
Onomatopoeia came from Rome, had a head of angel hair. Couldn't speak a word of English, no one cared. Onomatopoeia flew out everywhere. Pia had a real communication flair.
This is actually a play on the word onomatopoeia, which is a formation of a word from a sound associated with what is named. So, for example, the word sizzle or cuckoo, the sound is what that word is. And so I'm thinking it has something to do with an opera singer named Onomatopoeia. And because, Russell has that really high falsetto voice.
Yes.
And oftentimes I think when I'm listening, especially from more recent Sparks albums, that he is kind of doing it in an operatic voice. And I know that's just his voice, but I sometimes think he does try to raise it just a little bit. I think that based on the title of this song, along with what that title literally means, that it has a lot to do with an operatic sound that he's trying to come across as both a singer and the lyrics of the song.
And that leads us into the next song. T-Bone, to me, this is going to be a classic song, iPhone.
Put your fucking iPhone down and listen to me. Put your fucking iPhone down and listen to me. Listen to me.
What can I say? I love this song.
Oh, you and me both.
The piano and the use of synthesizers are great musically, but vocally, this is just perfect. Now, I don't know if they're saying on here vocally if this is becoming the new "Get Off My Lawn" for the older generation, but I think we can all feel the frustration they have with the use of technology and phones distracting.
Yeah, and you're not going to hear it on the podcast, but it does include a naughty word. But if you can get past that, the lyrics are extremely clever, including a reference to Abraham Lincoln of all people.
Nice. The next track, T-Bone, is my favorite on the album, The Existential Threat.
When I'm walking down the street or right behind the wheel, turning left, turning right, trying to escape the cloud that's close enough to feel, and you may laugh out loud, laugh out loud. The existential threat is always hanging up. I mean to say go away. The existential threat is never going away.
This is just a classic Spark song, vocal, musically on point, gets stuck in your head. It's just a pure joy song to me.
Yeah, it's funny you'd say that. I do quite like it. Maybe not quite as much as you, but I do like it quite a bit. For me, it was midway through the song. It sounds like they're playing under the big top of a circus. The way that the synthesizers, the organs, the different instrumentation was going through, I felt like that. I felt like there was a circus sound to this song, and that is what really brought me into it.
Yeah, and this one here is, we've talked sometimes about headphone tracks. This, when you listen to it, you can pick up different little sounds here and there.
Absolutely. It's a good song as we get closer to the end of the album.
Yeah, and speaking towards the end of the album, the next song, Nothing Travels Faster Than the Speed of Light.
Nothing travels faster than the speed of light, they tell you, but what they're telling you is really...
T-Bone, this one, I don't know if I was just exhausted throughout the album because it's been really well, and this one just did not. This one hit a wall for me.
Well, it is the 13th song of 14, and... Steve, you've lately been saying, are you reading my notes? And Steve, are you reading my notes? Yeah, because this one is really not one of the stronger songs on the album. It has such a leisurely pace to it that it doesn't help to build up towards a nice climax on this album. I got to say I'm disappointed in it as a song. It probably could have been left off.
Yeah, but Sparks more than makes up for it on the next song. Sparks rarely does a ballad. The next song on the album is Please Don't Fuck Up My World.
Please don't fuck up my world. I'd have nothing to live for. Please don't fuck up my world.
To me, this is a perfect ballad. And Sparks, correct me if I'm wrong, they really haven't used language a lot in their 20 plus albums.
They have not. And, I was reading a board while doing a little bit of research on this, and somebody had said, or maybe it was an article, but somebody had said they've never used these words before. And somebody had put in the notes or comments of that article that they actually have previously, but very limitedly. So it is a surprise.
No, and it's more powerful for him to do it because this does stress a point. And this was written, I think, right around 2019 in the U.S. with the election going on, and which party wins, there's always that concern about, are they going to change my world? Are they going to mess things up?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pretty straightforward song. It has a message in it, sometimes profane, but it is demanding humans to stop messing things up, whether it's political, environmental, social.
And I love how Sparks, to bring that home, has a children's choir even singing it. And they even highlight that in the verse. The children are singing.
Yeah, it's actually a little bit shocking when you first hear it. And then, the melody of it does start kicking in, and you don't really think about it being children who are singing this chorus. Yeah, it works. It's a great way to end the album. Most of these songs, there are a few that are a little bit more slower ballad type songs. This one is one of those, but it works wonderfully to close off an album.
Yeah, and to me, this is still a very strong Sparks album. They've got, I think you said this is their 24th album.
24th.
So they've got a lot to go back on. And you might have remembered them from the 80s. Like, I didn't know Sparks was still around. That's some of the discussions I had with a coworker. And then he also reminded me or another friend reminded me their introduction to Sparks was on, I think it was through Weird Al's tribute to Sparks.
Oh, yeah, right. I've forgotten about that. Well, Sparks, as we kind of mentioned earlier, Sparks has gone from glam rock of the 70s to post-disco in the late 70s to, which, probably is our favorite, the new wave kind of era that they had in the 80s, to finally where they are now, which is kind of more of an art or Baroque type pop music, including that kind of operatic sound to Russell's voice. As good as Russell is, Ron, who writes all the songs, the man is clearly a genius.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
And it really comes across, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend checking out the Sparks Brothers documentary. It's a great way to kind of get reintroduced to Sparks, see their influences and what they've influenced. And I love the tagline in it. It's your band's favorite band.
Going back to Ron, he's clearly a man who has that ability to intertwine lesser known subjects or everyday situations into a song that becomes entirely accessible.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give this album a recommendation. I think it has some weaknesses to it. I got to say, as much as I love Sparks and I did really enjoy this album, I feel it could have been cut by at least 4 or 5 songs. I don't know how you feel on that subject.
Yeah,
Steve.
that could have been cut by a couple. I still enjoyed it, but like I said, there's at least 3 that I'll skip when I'm not doing a podcast review.
Well, and considering it has 14 songs, to skip 3, maybe 4 songs is really not a loss.
No. And as we do before the next review, we got a quick music news. T-Bone and myself are going to start this podcast this year with a new segment of concert reviews. Unfortunately, we've already had the first wave of postponements. We were supposed to see Oingo Boingo former members a week ago. That got postponed at the last minute for a couple months out. And Erasure just announced today that they're postponing their concerts for January and February. Rescheduled dates will be forthcoming soon, and when we have those, we'll also update you as well. But T-Bone, I'm betting Eraser's going to get their tour dates rescheduled before Adamant.
I think anybody is going to get their scheduled tour dates before Adamant. I'm to the point that I almost just want my money back.
Yeah, I think that the concert tickets we bought in 2020 to see Adamant for his U.S. tour, I think that's just being now a donation.
Well, I'd rather have my money back. Okay, and so the other thing that has kind of been in the news lately is Elvis Costello is asking radio stations to no longer play one of his songs. He says he's not going to play it in concert either. But the song is Oliver's Army. And if you know the song well, you probably know why. There is a racial slur in the song. It is not meant to be that. The song is actually about the Troubles, which, if you're not familiar with that, the Troubles was the war between the Protestants and the Catholics in Ireland, and the song is about a soldier in that war, and the word is used in a different way than it would maybe be used here in the U.S. But needless to say, he's asked for that song not to be played anymore. I don't know if radio stations will follow that. I don't even know if radio stations are playing that song because of that word. Needless to say, he would prefer that it not be played anymore.
And the next album we have to review for you guys is the new one from They Might Be Giants. You may remember They Might Be Giants with such hits as Don't, Let's Start.
Don't, let's start. This is the worst part. Could believe for all the world that you are my precious little girl. But don't, let's start. I've got a weak heart and I don't get around.
Anna Egg.
And I are getting old and we still haven't walked in the glow of each other's majestic presence. Listen and hear my words. They're the ones you would think I would say if there was a me for you.
And Birdhouse in Your Soul.
Canary in the alley by the light switch. Who watches over you? Make a little birdhouse in your soul. Not to put too fine a point on it. Say I'm the only bee in your bonnet. Make a little birdhouse in your soul.
They Might Be Giants recently, we just talked about Sparks, who's doing their 50th anniversary. They Might Be Giants is now doing their 40th anniversary. They've got their, this is what, their 23rd album.
Yeah, and that's funny because 23 albums. Now, how many did Sparks have over 20 more years?
24.
Yeah. So, if there's any word for They Might Be Giants, it's prolific. They are constantly putting out new material. Now, this one is called Book. It came out this year, 2021. Of course, it has the regulars John Flansburgh on vocals and guitars, John Linnell on vocals and keyboards. Then it has Marty Beller on drums, Danny Weinkauf on bass, and Kurt Ram on horns.
And T-Bone, I don't know if you knew this or not, but They Might Be Giants, I'll give them credit on the creativity on how many formats they release Book in. Not only is it on digital, CD, vinyl, a book and CD, a cassette tape, but they also had a limited edition 8-track.
Oh my. Yeah. I'd like to know what the press run is for a cassette, but I'd really like to know what it is for 8-track. Yeah. This is really an ambitious group of songs for this new album. As you mentioned, the book that actually comes with it is 144 pages of photos circa this album and 2018's I Like Fun and My Murdered Remains. And in addition, to make it even more creative, along with all these photos are the lyrics typed on a 1970 IBM Selectric typewriter.
Nice. So this album, T-Bone, starts off with a great They Might Be Giants song. Synopsis for latecomers.
I'm afraid we'll have to leave it right there. Be assured that there's nothing more that can be done. That's all the questions that time will permit. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it right there. Be assured that there's nothing more that can be done. Doodly 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 doo. Doodly doo 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 doo.
And what a way to start a They Might Be Giants album, in my opinion. I love how each verse gets more ridiculous, leading up to the question on the climax of the song, of the question of who ate the babies.
It's funny that you'd say that because that is in my notes also. Who ate the babies? What? What does that even mean? Yeah, this is, sort of an introduction to new listeners 23 albums in. But the thing is, as you kind of just noted, it doesn't say anything about the band. It just goes around in circles. And it is, we talked about this song or that song being a pure Sparks song. For me, this one is just that.
Oh, this is
and
classic.
What made it even better is that late in the song is a guitar solo, which does not happen in They Might Be Giants songs.
Yeah, and it's not a long song. It's only like 2.5 minutes.
It's very short. Yeah, and that's one of the things about this album is that it has almost as many songs as it actually has more songs than the Sparks album, but the songs are so short, it just flies by.
Yeah, that leads us to the next track, Moonbeam Rays. John's vocals to me are on point, but so are the lyrics. I love some of the lyrics on there. The times I have missed you, you didn't miss me. Just love how this is kind of like a fun breakup song. The song is short, but I loved it.
Yeah, it has a real kind of a sparkly pop sound to it also. Maybe like even a 60s kind of, like I say, pop song that is typical They Might Be Giants, but at the same time, it's fresh.
Yeah, it definitely feels fresh on this. And you're right. It does have that 60s or retro type feel.
Yes.
vibe.
Now, number 3 is I Broke My Own Rules.
I broke my rule, I broke my own rule. I've got no one else to blame. What happens when
Instrumentally, this one is pure Giants. I don't know that there's a better song on here just for the instrumentation alone, let alone the lyrics.
Yeah, and this is, to me, is another classic. This is one of my favorite ones off this album, actually. And the other John takes over on vocals on this one, as They Might Be Giants do. So I like the good little mix-up. They play off of each other very well.
Absolutely, yeah. And so you mentioned that's one of your favorites. I'm going to go into the next one, which is one of my favorites, and that's Brontosaurus.
it's easy to ignore us, people found it easy to ignore this. Brontosaurus.
This song has some of the most amazing rhymes. Ignore us, chorus, porous, especially with the title, obviously, but also throughout the whole song, there's different words that are used in such creative rhyming that it really follows with what we've known from They Might Be Giants for the past 40 years.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is we're 4 songs into this, and all 4 of these are just classic They Might Be Giants sounding. Could have been on this album. It could have been on their album 10, 20, 15, 20 plus years ago. And this one, Brontosaurus, will get stuck in your head probably for weeks.
It has for me.
And then T-Bone, we get to one of my favorite ones, Lord Snowden.
Lord Snowden reporting for service. Ashtrays and busy lines. Silent days, always with you, dear. No one is working.
I love how this opens kind of with that 60s type sound organ. And then once the chorus hits you, it's a great mix of the horns, drums, keyboards, vocals. This is one of my favorite tracks on the album.
Yeah, it didn't hit me quite as strong as it did you. I do like the instrumentation on it. It just didn't really pack much of a punch for myself. I think that it probably has something more to say as a song than what it allowed me in as. I just didn't really catch what the point of it was. I did like the instrumentation, though.
Then we get to the next song, If Day.
Here's a new song for our zero-piece band and everyone else who survived. If Day is for everyone, not just for Winnipeg. If Day is for everyone from now on.
And at first glance, you think this is maybe just some wacky They Might Be Giants lyrics. But if you dig down to find out what If Day was a day that was in Winnipeg or Canada that they'd practice if the Nazis invaded Canada, how they would react, how they would do.
Right, yeah. And the full title of the song is If Day for Winnipeg. And it really is an interesting story. Just like you mentioned, it was on February 19th, 1942, as a war bond promotion. Canada staged a firefight between troops and volunteers dressed as German soldiers. I mean, it included everything from book burning, and currency was replaced by Reichmarks.
Wow, I didn't know it went into that.
Yeah, and it was a big deal back in 42, and it was designed to let people know what was going on the other side of the world.
Yeah, and musically on this album, I like how they kind of got the use of the wood blocks. You even got like a foghorn type sound going throughout it. But what hit me more is I never really thought I would see They Might Be Giants turning a song into a political song.
Well, yeah, and it is political, I suppose, but that's the beauty of it is you wouldn't know it by the lyrics necessarily. I mean, they're a little vague, and that's what I had to do. I had to look this up and find out, because I thought they're not just going to write a song called If Day. You know, I mean, there's got to be something behind this. And, to go back, just as you were mentioning, yeah, this song really uses a totally different approach for the instruments. It really is one of my favorite songs on the album.
Oh, no question. And that brings us to the next track, I Can't Remember the Dream.
When I tried to remember the dream that I had last night, it was gone, but the feeling I had in the dream stayed on. When I'm awake and I look around me, I can feel.
This one uses the main riff. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like they're using their main riff from Louie Louie and trying to make it into their own. To me, again, this is another classic They Might Be Giants sounding song. A song that sounds happy, but looking at the lyrics, they're quite a bit dark, as a lot of They Might Be Giants lyrics are if you dig down into them.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, you were absolutely right about Louie Louie. I didn't really, I knew that I was hearing something there that they maybe were playing against, but it didn't really, go into my brain as to who that was. And so bringing that up, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And we've kind of talked about how both John and John seem to tend to share vocal duties. And if you've seen them in concert, first off, fantastic show, but they do a good job of rotating songs. But this one, they do a good job to complement each other vocally on throughout the song. And then T-Bone, we moved to the next song, which I love the title, Drown the Clown. It opens very well. Lyrically, vocally, it works. It's just, as we talked about through the Sparks album, you hear it, it's going to be a classic Sparks. This is classic They Might Be Giants.
Right, yeah. It's maybe not one of my favorite songs on the album. It's certainly not a bad song by any means. It's short enough that even if it's not one of your favorite songs, it will zip right through and get on to the next one. So, there's nothing to complain about that. I mean, more from They Might Be Giants is probably better than less.
Yeah. And then it moves quickly into the next song, Darling the Dose.
Time has the power to bind us too close. The dose is the poison we've had more than most. Darling.
This one's a slower track on the album. They do have some great piano and bass work on it. Again, like the previous song, it's quick. It's not. I didn't hate it. It wasn't one of my favorite, but I didn't hate this one.
Well, what's interesting is, and I didn't research this. I was just taking the lyrics and listening to some of the wording in it. And if I'm understanding this right, this is a song about Hamlet's father being poisoned.
What?
And yeah, it's the dose that Hamlet's father took to be poisoned in the Shakespeare play. And it's done so playfully, though, that you're not going to immediately notice something more serious like that. And it's not yet another reason why the Giants are one of the more creative bands around.
No kidding. And then we get to the next track, I Lost Thursday.
I lost Thursday like it was nothing. That fact is uncontested.
T-Bone, I love this song.
I can't agree more.
I think as part of the whole, when we shut down for COVID, if you didn't know what day it was, and I kind of got the feeling they were writing that during that time, where you kind of lose track of what day of the week it is.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do think this is a song about the pandemic. A title like I Lost Thursday, when we were all locked down and we almost didn't know what day it was anymore. I think this one very much falls in that kind of a memory. And what I really like about this song, especially, is it has a really funky bass line.
Oh, yeah, it does.
And you know how much T-Bone likes a bass line.
I know T-Bone loves the bass.
And vocals straight out of the 70s. They get kind of deep and down, and it is a fun song. And I have it on my notes as one of my favorites on the album.
Yeah. Then the next song on the album, Part of You Wants to Believe Me.
Part of you wants to believe me, but part of you isn't yet totally off of your meds. Part of you senses that all of the story is totally making no sense.
This was another one that I loved on the album. It's just we keep talking about classic They Might Be Giants sound. I don't know how to describe it, but you listen to this, you'll hear it.
Well, my main thing about this song, it keeps making me laugh, is a hilarious opening line. Part of you wants to believe, but part of you isn't totally off of your meds.
Yep.
I mean, that says They Might Be Giants, maybe better than any lyric ever produced.
And then we get to probably one of my other favorites of this album, is Super Cool.
Working hard to just convince myself how to lose it on the dance floor. Super cool. Super cool. Super cool.
I just love this track. I love how it opens, love the vocals. Everything on this track worked for me. And I love the subtle, you like the bass. This one has a very subtle bass that you can hear. And I love how they just didn't go overboard with it.
Yeah, I agree. And, it's another song, and it's a very kind of wispily fun song that, isn't taking itself too seriously, but it also has great, clever lyrics. When you come around, I hide my face in hyperspace. And that just is pure They Might Be Giants. But in addition to that, it has a great hand claps to begin the song.
Oh, yeah, it does.
And they really caught my attention. Next up is Wait, Actually, Yeah, No.
20-car collision, wait, actually, yeah, no. Someone you don't know.
This is a clever song about indecision, clearly, and it has a really nice use of horns, especially towards the end. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's not one of the greatest songs on the album. Maybe we're starting to get towards the end, but I really thought it worked well, especially with how the title kind of says what the song is about.
Yeah, it kind of plays off of it, and I like you said, I like the horns on there. Those are also a staple from previous They Might Be Giants albums, or it's a staple of They Might Be Giants sound.
Yeah. Number 14, we're getting towards the end, is called Quit the Circus.
Seeking a purpose, stuck in the circus. Now I make as much sense.
This one has a really wonderful, funky undercurrent, especially during the chorus. I think it's one of maybe not one of my favorite songs on the album, but I think it is a strong way as we get towards the end of the album.
We've talked how sometimes albums drag out the songs, but this one does work towards the end of this album, and it's not that long. And that leads us to the last song on the album, Less Than One.
I took a walk, I got tired, I turned around and I got almost home, but then I got tired and turned around again.
To me, this was a fun track to close out the album. It wasn't one of my top on the album, wasn't one of my least favorite, but it did a good job. A lot of times we talk about how the album kind of falls apart at the end of closing. This one does a good job of just kind of, you get done listening to it with a smile on your face.
You know what? The one thing I've always enjoyed about They Might Be Giants is that many of their songs, and we kind of mentioned this about the Sparks album also, but many of their songs are about specific real world subjects, while others are, or at least they seem to be, about everyday nothingness. But if there's any, Steve, I really think that you'll probably agree with me. We mentioned this earlier in this part of the review, but if there's any word that adequately describes the Giants throughout their career, and that is consistent. They've always put out albums regularly.
Yes.
They put out really good albums regularly. They do great concerts regularly. They are a consistent band.
I would agree. And to me, this album from start to finish was very solid. They Might Be Giants. In my opinion, this is probably one of the best albums they've done in the last 10, maybe even 20 years. Obviously, to me, the pinnacle or the highlight for They Might Be Giants, or the gold standard, is the album Flood.
Well, of course, yeah, and that's.
But this I'd put in my top 5 out of their 24 albums.
Yes, right. Well, and I agree. I would probably put it right up there with some of my favorites from them. They've had so many good ones over the years that have not received any sort of recognition or airplay or anything. So many great songs. This one follows right with them all. So I want to close things off with these reviews by just making a note. I personally, even though I talked plenty, I found these albums somewhat difficult to review. And I put a lot of thought into it. This may come across wrongly, I don't know, but I think it's simply because I don't see myself as smart as these guys. They Might Be Giants, both John and John, especially Ron of Sparks. These guys are brilliant. And
I would say genius.
I would too, and I mentioned that earlier with Ron. I just don't feel like I'm as smart as they are. I mean, I'm not an idiot, but at the same time, they're so smart that sometimes it makes it difficult. If it's just a simple love song or something like that, you know what you're getting.
And you're not going to get that from Sparks or They Might Be Giants.
You're not. You're not going to get those things. And for me, it made it a little bit more difficult to review. Now, having said that, it does not change the fact that this is thoroughly enjoyable music. Whether you've been following the band since the early 70s or since the early 80s when they each of them started respectively, or you're just becoming a little bit more into what they've been doing, these albums are pretty strong albums to go with, whether it's old or new for you.
Yeah, in addition to recommending these albums, I'm going to give a recommendation. If you have not seen They Might Be Giants in concert, you really need to see them. They are hopefully, knock on wood, going to be retouring their Flood 30th anniversary a couple of years later. this spring, summer. However, I think all the shows are sold out. They've been sold out for a couple of years.
Well, and we've got tickets to the show here. You know, I mean, you mentioned in the news all these cancellations, and I just have my fingers crossed because, Steve, I don't know how many times we've seen them, but
I'm so looking forward to it after these couple years. I need a They Might Be Giants album
every single
concert.
time they come. We've got to go because, they put on such an entertaining show. I mean, not only as musicians, but just what they do on stage, everything from...
Oh, we've talked about it. You can see bands that love what they do. They love what they do.
Well, yeah, and it's not just, musically or singing. They put on puppet shows, for crying out loud. It's just always something so interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we thank you for joining us on this episode. Of course, if you enjoy it or you know anybody else that does, make sure they subscribe on their favorite provider. Leave us any reviews that you might want on your different podcast providers. Visit our page on Facebook, on Instagram. Send us an email at don'tyoufforgetpodcast@yahoo.com. We always love to hear from you.
And if you guys have any other recommendations on albums we should review this year, give us a shout out or give us an idea on our Facebook page. Leave those recommendations on there. And on our next episode, we're going to be featuring the new album from James and from Sting. Until then, we'll see you guys next time.